Hi, folks. Good afternoon, and God bless you. I wanted to do an update and explain my understanding of the Sixth Court Circuit of Appeals decision on Friday, which dissolved the stay on Biden's unconstitutional and illegal attempted mandates requiring the poison um, or other draconian alternatives requiring employers to who have over 100 employees to enforce this OSHA alleged mandate. It's not a mandate. It's just a proposal at this point. It always has been and still is. And there's some confusion about that. So I want to take a few minutes and explain this for folks. First, let me take a moment and say that, you know, people in the past have experienced persecution because of who they are, who they worship, and this is no different. Um, if you're somebody who believes that this is the mark and that the other um, measures, muzzling, the deprivation of oxygen, breaking the blood-brain barrier with a bunch of poisons is also um, religiously, spiritually unacceptable to you. You still have those rights. And I will leave a link as to where I kind of explain that a little bit more as well. First and foremost, let me praise the Most High because I really appreciate everything that He has done for me and the understanding about this that He has given me. Just an example, folks, of other people who face difficult circumstances in the past too. Let us remember in the book of Daniel, um, how Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were taken captive out of Jerusalem. Jerusalem was sacked by Babylon for its disobedience to the Most High. Um, they were being abominable then, and they're being abominable now. It's never stopped. So to think that it had stopped at any period of time is naive. And we're seeing it all play out on a global scale. So in any event, what I wanted to remind folks today and point out is the history of a little bit of bravery and faith in the Most High, and he can do anything with a snap of his fingers. So we're just a thought, and it is done. So if you all remember, in the book of Daniel, after these folks were taken captive and um, King Nebuchadnezzar erected a statue, a dedication of an image. And it was a golden image, said to be 60 cubits high and 60 cubits width. So all of the people, the princes, the governors, captains, treasurers, judges, counselors, sheriffs, and province rulers, and all the people in the land were required to worship this golden image. Whenever they played an instrument, they were required to lay prostrate on the ground and worship this false idol. So they all did so, except for Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And they were, can you imagine being three people in all of Babylon that go against a mandate? There were just three people in the whole nation, in all the provinces and the lands of Babylon, that did not comply. So they were brought before the king, ratted out, and brought before the king, and he heated the oven, the furnace, the fiery furnace, I believe 17 times hotter than it already was. And upon threat of death, they were asked one more time to bow down and worship the image. And what they said to the king, I think ought to make us take heart. They said, "Our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, let it be known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." Right to his face, plainly and simply, will not comply and worship this false god. And so they were thrown into the furnace, which was so hot it consumed the men throwing them in. And what happened? Well, the Most High did choose to spare them. And when King Nebuchadnezzar looked into the fiery furnace, he saw 4 figures walking. One who appeared, he said, like the Son of God. How powerful is he? All flesh is his. And so we serve the Most High, and we will not comply no matter what any law, measure, mandate says. That's the big picture. Now, the little picture, the big picture on the little picture is that the 6th Court of Appeal, this is what happened, folks, on Friday. Okay. Now, procedural history. On November 5th, 2021, OSHA issued what's called an ETS, which is basically an emergency order. But what it is a proposed order, because emergency order or regular requirement has to go through what's called a notice and comment procedure. This is why enforcement is illegal until this notice and comment procedure passes. That is 6 months, plus an additional 60 days for notice and posting and all this other stuff. So OSHA's requirement that people take the poison or break their blood-brain barrier with poison and muzzle up, cover up the face of the children of God, is just a proposed regulation until 8 months from November 5th, 2021. So I would suggest, folks, that if you know somebody who's been fired, you ought to share this information with them, because if you've been fired based on a proposed regulation that is not a real enforceable regulation and suffered damages, there's some significant liability there. Now, also keep in mind, folks, that this does not affect anybody's right to a religious exemption. The 6th Court opinion issued on Friday, which is, a terrible opinion, terrible how it breaks these issues down. But, by the way, they say right in the first paragraph, the old normal will not return. So think of that as gone. In any event, what happened on Friday is that the 6th Court got this case because, get this, the government notified that there's all these multi-district cases on the same issue. So despite the case first being in the 5th Court of Appeals, the lottery system, quote unquote, put it into the 6th Court of Appeal, Lucifer's favorite number. So That's how it ended up in the Sixth Court most recently. And they took away the emergency stay, basically the emergency restraining order, preventing any companies from going along with this proposed rule. So this is still going through litigation. There's going to be arguments on both sides before this is fully decided. So this is still, understand folks, a proposed rule. So, and in addition to it being a proposed rule for the poison or weekly testing and masking, with respect to any OSHA standard, emergency or otherwise, right? Employers may seek a variance from this. So the extent to which they are enforcing it depends on how much they are judging the quote unquote safety needs of their situation. So they're putting, even though they're the ones creating the problem and offering this horrible regulation and going through this dance in the courts, they say the employer, not OSHA, can require the, right? They can't, really. That's patently illegal. Exercise your right to a religious exemption. And folks, you don't apply for a religious exemption. You have a religious exemption once you say, I have a sincerely held religious belief that X, Y, and Z. This is the mark. If you don't want to say that's what I would say. But there's other ways to fully express this. There's scripture that addresses covering your face. There's tons of supporting documentation. I mean, um, expressions, ways that you can explain this to your employer. You don't have to be a Christian. You can be an atheist too and get a religious exemption because you have a personally held, sincerely held belief. Okay, so I put more about this. It's a lot to explain. So I've done a website on this, which right now I have to adjust it because it's not really user friendly by the phone. On a desktop, it is much more so. But lexdevac, I'll put a link up, which is law devac in Latin, and I'm going to provide like as many examples as I can of how to explain your request for a religious exemption. And then what happens is once that is you given your employer for you probably usually happens you give them verbal notice and then you give them written notice, then they have a requirement to accommodate that. So if you also know folks whose religious exemptions have gotten denied, I'd have them talk to somebody about that as well, because that's some serious liability too. You know. So anyway, this is kind of the lay of the land right now. They have dissolved the initial preliminary injunction on the stay, and the case is proceeding forward. It does not make it a law. This OSHA is still, any OSHA procedure is still required to comply with your right to religious exemption, and it's going to go through more litigation. Now, I got some feelings about where it's going to go and why. I think that they're going to hang their hat on the clause, except where necessary for protection of health and safety of others, and litigate that to the teeth, to the hilt. I mean, but you have a right to an exemption, folks, no matter what all this is happening in the courts. So keep that in mind. So I love you, folks. God bless you. I'll talk to you soon.